Okay, so this Hangout Air is live finally. So sorry to our students about this inconvenience. As most of you know, working with technology poses a big challenge every time, right, Ildi?
Absolutely. It takes a while to get online.
Yes, so we had some technical issues, but fortunately we were able to manage those because we are a team. So now we are ready to answer the questions you kindly posted on the forum. But have you got a message from May saying that we're online, or are we online?
I haven't received a text message from May yet, so hopefully she will. Okay, no, that's an old one. That's an old text message. So I
Okay,
don't know
so
whether we are online or not, whether she can see us or not, but
she will
apparently,
tell us, yeah. So shall we move on to Blackboard then?
yes, I'm right here. So, um, okay, we have two forums. One was created by May,
Yeah.
and we have the forum that you created. Both
Yes.
forums are for questions. So I'm looking at the questions that students posted on May's forum.
Mhm.
Back, this particular one was posted at 14th of December, so way before Christmas.
Yes.
And it's a question about, wait a second. There's
Yes.
one
Questions
question.
or queries about the written assignment?
Mhm. Yeah. So there's one for Title C. Someone asked a question about Title C.
Oh,
About,
yes, I can see it.
right. So this is about a short radio talk about
Oh, yes,
social.
the materials, yes.
Right. And this particular person wants to know, what do you mean by a short radio talk about social behavior in a foreign country? And what is this activity like? Well, um, if
Well,
you,
it's according to the Title C, it says critically evaluate learning opportunities provided in the teaching materials, Module 7, socializing in cutting edge, to enable students at B1 to B2 level to produce a short radio talk about social behavior in a foreign country. So I think the students don't have to create the short radio talk, but to evaluate how this is presented in those materials.
right, so as you can see here, so
Yes.
we already scanned in these pages for this module, for this particular lesson. It doesn't mean it has to be a one lesson and you have to cover all the material in one lesson. But this particular page, I don't know if you can see it, but on this particular page, it is right here. It says right here, well, you probably can't see it, but anyway, it's right there.
Yeah, I can see,
That,
but they can find these materials on Blackboard. So
yes. And it talks about this short radio talk. It's a speaking task, and you have to, well, obviously you have to use your imagination. You have to see how the previous activities in this material build up to this speaking task. So if you really look at all the activities, you will realize that that's some sort of a logical connection. You have to analyze it. You have to realize it. And if I look at the question back, it says, what is this activity like? Well, as a teacher, you have to imagine it yourself. It has to be some sort of a talk between two people, maybe not two people. You have to read the instructions. You
yes,
have to read the materials beforehand, what kind of activities build up to this activity. And you have to, as a teacher, you have to know what you expect the students to do. So we cannot tell you this is how the activity is. You have the instructions, and you as a teacher, you have to interpret what you think you would visualize, how you visualize the students to do this activity, to carry out this activity.
Yes, I mean, what I understand by a short talk about social behavior is like those podcasts. I think the students will be familiarized with that kind of audio file. So you have two people talking about a specific theme.
Right. If I read once again, if I read the instructions here in this material, it says, first of all, there's a preparation. You have to
Yeah.
prepare for this speaking activity. And it says, reading here, imagine, this is one of the options. So imagine you have been asked to appear on a radio program aimed at people over 50. And you basically you read the instructions, and prepare what you would say if people ask you on a radio program to come along, talk on the radio, and what would you say about habits and customs and cultural norms about your country.
Yes, and they have to pay attention because it says in the instruction that they need to explain in their own words what they understand about the roles played by input, learning, and use in learning English as a second language according to
Scrivener?
here. Yeah,
Yeah,
Scribner
yeah,
and
because
other authors.
yeah, because obviously to get to this point in the lesson, you have to build up to this point,
Yes.
and the build up includes input, some sort of learning, and this is the output. This is when the students are going to actually start speaking. That's the output.
Yeah.
So you have to once again, the question itself, even though it's good that you ask the question, but we can describe it to you. What is the activity like? Because you have to visualize it yourself.
Yes, and they have to evaluate the opportunities for learning that these kinds of activities um, give the students.
Right. So
Yes.
once again, you really have to um,
Analyze the materials
right,
basically.
to see how the previous activities build up to the eventual uh, post task or post activity, right? Because it's basically all this speaking that's going to happen here. Where are we? I think, yeah, here we are. This particular speaking task will build on previous teaching, input, learning.
Yes.
Okay, so that was one of the questions. That was
Yes.
title C.
There's another one about table of contents, but um, yes, May responded and said no. That is more for the dissertation. So no table of contents and no abstract either, just in case.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So that was pretty clear.
I think there was one more question in May's forum, and that was
Okay.
about question for title B. It says, could you please explain further what it refers by using relevant TESOL or second language learning theories and literature on good practice? What does it exactly mean by good practice? Any examples?
Oh, yes, I can see that. Just let me, well, good practice basically means that you have to, or the student has to provide the evidence of their claims based on previous work.
Right.
So if it says here on title B, discuss a specific issue in teaching or learning in a content supporting evidence from relevant theories and principle it means that they can identify a problem and then link that to any of these theories that they have seen in class. For example, the input theory of crashing, or
Yeah, so basically they have to go back to this book. This book is full of theories for all the approaches and methodologies. So that's why I actually may emphasize that you had to, there's one particular page. 1 second, I'll try to find that page.
yeah.
Here we are. This is the page that may emphasize. Basically, if you understand this, well, to understand this, you have to understand the book. And in particular, you have to understand, I'll show you, you basically have to understand chapter 2, and you have to also understand how the book is actually built up, how the author designed this book. If you read chapter 2 is just an overview of theories. And when we talk about theories, you will see, if you go on to chapter 2, it talks about language theories and learning theories.
Mm-hmm.
There are theories because you teach a language, the student learn a language, so there has to be your way of teaching, or teacher's way of teaching,
Yes.
is based, or is supposed to be based on theory about what language is, and theory about learning, how people learn. So go over to chapter 2, and that is absolutely the basics, and then use that as a springboard and see this particular, if you find a particular issue, what kind of approach the teachers are using, and what's wrong with that approach, what's wrong with that methodology, or what's wrong with that the technique, the procedure. So that's what it means. This book,
Yes.
it's full of theories.
So basically, check out Richards and Rogers, and it's a classic that all teachers should know. So check that book, and according to the issue and teaching of or learning that you have identified, then link it to the theories in the book and present evidence from other authors as well, because Richards and Rogers present one point of view, then perhaps other authors have something else to say about that issue.
Yeah, well, if Richards and Rogers is an excellent book if you want to get really an overall general idea of what theories are out there, and you might want to compare it with ideas about principles.
Oh, the Diane Larson Freeman, yes.
Exactly. So yes.
Reading, reading is the key, and identifying an issue. Then you identify the theories that you would like to link to that issue, and then analyze that and propose some improvements and a critical reflection.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so shall we move on to, there's another question in that same question. It says, after discussing the advantages and implication of our proposal, do we need to mention the limitations as well?
Okay. Well,
I think it's good to acknowledge some limitations.
Right. I mean, usually that's what criticality is, that you think about, okay, first of all, you find the issue, you find a problem, you are critical about the problem that you've noticed, you observed, you read about, and then you come up with solutions or implications, but you have to reflect on these implications as well critically, and that could lead to limitations. Not it's just part of critical analysis and looking at something critically.
Yes, because sometimes we say, well, we can propose this, a certain strategy, to improve our issue or to deal with our issue, but also that can have limitations as well, and it's good to acknowledge them at least. I mean, perhaps that can be a theme for a different assignment, the limitations only, but it would be a good idea to mention them at least.
Yes.
For us to know that you have critically analyzed and critically reflect on this issue, and that you're aware of the limitations that they can pose.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the second question within the question.
Mm-hmm.
So shall we go to the
your forum?
Yes, to my discussion board. I think we have a couple of questions. Well, more than a couple, actually, a few questions there.
Yeah. So we have option 1, right? It's about the peer teaching.
Yes.
Lessons. Whether you can make corrections on the previous version. Do we need to submit the same teaching plan, or can we make some corrections on the previous version? And basically, this person got the answers from...
Yes, that's very good. Thanks to those who responded that question.
And that actually, that response was good. Yes.
Yes.
So you cannot change the original plan. However, when you get to reflecting on what you did, why you did it, that's when you can suggest changes.
Exactly.
However, you have to submit the original one, because your markers will see the video that is based on the original plan. So you can confuse them by submitting a new lesson plan to an old...
And that was the plan they were evaluated on.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like you say, Ildi, then you can suggest the changes, but submit the original plan.
Right, because if you look at the so this is the title A, right? The lesson, the peer teaching lesson, and it says here one component of this essay should be critically evaluate part that you have taught, and it said reflect on ideas, discuss possible modifications. So yes, you have to reflect, you have to be critical, you have to see what was good, what was not, what could change, and talk about the changes that you could implement and why would you. But it doesn't mean that you have to submit a changed lesson plan.
Yes. So there is another question within that question, somebody who replied to this person, and she said, I have some problems with the presentation of literature and references.
Yes, unfortunately, I have no idea what to do with it, because it's more of a statement than a question, so I don't really know what the question is.
Well, I think they can refer to the handbook. I think it has been modified in terms of what is the style to present literature and the conventions to present the references.
Okay.
So here in the university, we use the Harvard style. If that's what they mean, they need to do the referencing according to that. They can also go to the Writing Development Center website. If they go to the Robinson Library website and find information about referencing there, and how to present the literature review, because what we have found in previous years is that how the references are presented and how the in-text citations are presented is not consistent. So it's a piece of advice for the students to remain consistent and to use the style suggested by the university.
Yes. And
Yes, I think that.
markers do actually check your reference list, so don't mess it up.
Yes, yes. So if that is what the student means, I think they should go to the handbook and check for the reference section.
Yep.
All right, so let's go back to the discussion board.
Yeah, we have here, I assume it's specialize the activity or specify the activity.
Oh yes, okay. So
Title
this
B.
student in Title B, regarding the discussion of a specific issue in teaching or learning as a foreign language in a context you're familiar with. So this is as well for the students to be aware of, that they have to describe the marker or the reader can understand more about the issue that they present.
Right, and it's very good that you mentioned that the reader has to understand.
Yes.
So the student asks the question, should I state the whole procedure? For example, the teacher should do step 1, step 2, step 3, or just explain why this improvement is useful. Now remember that when you write for the reader. The reader has to understand your logic. So if you explain why an improvement is useful, then obviously you have to explain what the improvement is.
Yes.
Which means that you have to explain the steps. Otherwise you would have a missing link.
Yes.
So it has to be logical, and you have to have all the details that necessary for the reader to understand, to follow your logic, to follow your argument.
Yes, basically that's it, to present a coherent and consistent argument. So as the student says here, raise the problem, back up with evidence from the literature review, give the solutions or improvement, and how they came up to this improvement. So yes, include the procedures and the suggestions that you make to solve this problem.
Yeah. Okay, so we can move on to the next question.
Yeah.
Title A. My question is that our lesson plan should be attached to lesson is the appendix. The appendices are not included in the total word count. Otherwise, you would end up with 3,000 words very quickly.
Are you looking at questions about Title A?
Title A,
Yeah. Okay. Yes. No. The like Ildi says, no, because in the appendices you put everything that couldn't be included in the essay, and sometimes one appendix is your whole data. So
right. So yes, the title page is not included in the word count. The appendices are not included in the word count. The reference list is not included in the word count. In the word count, your essay, your argument, your literature review, your argument. Basically, that is what included in the word count.
yeah, so 3,000 words in the essay, that's what it counts.
Mm-hmm. So then we have another, in the same question we have in the,
in the critical evaluation part, could I reflect on my teaching part by changing the exercise I use? Since changing the exercise to some degree means to change the focus of my part. In the while listening part, I thought I would like to change the previous blank filling exercise into true false questions. The former focuses on the words which should be filled in the blanks themselves, but the latter focuses on students' understanding of the detailed information in the listening material. I would like to know whether this is permitted. I think, Ildi, you clarified that before for another student. That I think we were talking about the original lesson plan and then the new lesson plan.
Right. So you have to, the essay is based on the original lesson plan, on the original activities. When you write your essay, in your essay, you're gonna reach a point where you have to reflect, critically reflect on what you did and why you did it. And that's the point where you realize, okay, well, what I did in my peer teaching actually wasn't, could improve. And that's when you start explaining why it should be improved, using theories, using principles.
Yes.
And not just you imagining, oh, I think it would be work better. But the question is, why do you think it would work better? What is the principle behind it? What is the theory behind that? And then when you explain using relevant, that's right, in every single title it says, use relevant TESOL theories and principles. So then you can, as you reflect, you can explain how you would change it. What would be the implications of your reflection? How the exercise would look different.
Mm-hmm.
So, you when you submit the lesson plan in the appendix, that lesson plan is the original one. Because when your marker goes back, once again, the marker goes back to the video and watches you, they will see what you performed, what you produced based on your original lesson plan.
Yes.
Yeah?
So
But yes, a huge part of this essay is reflection, is understanding what you did, why you did it, and how it could have been better.
yes, and using literature review, evidence from authors to back your ideas.
Right. So once again, highly recommended book.
Yes.
Very good book, really.
Richards and Rogers, Diane Larson Freeman.
Yes.
So they.
And this is what you used a lot in the lectures. But once again, go back to this book. There's a lot of theory that these authors actually bring up.
Yeah, that's the basic. It's a classic from teaching and learning English as a second language. So
Right. Yes. So yeah, use them as springboards. Yeah.
sorry.
You can use these. Students can use these as springboards. It doesn't
Yes,
mean that
yes.
this is the only book, because then your reference
No.
would be very limited. So
Yes, they should complement the books with articles that they read from journals, from a paper, from a book chapter, etc.
right, yeah. So I think that answers the question, I hope.
Yes.
Then
So
we'll go on to another question.
it says questions.
Could I use I think to express my opinion?
Ah.
Could I use I think to express my opinion or experience in the writing assignments? Okay.
Well, this is an interesting one, because people sometimes say, should I use I? Should I use a third person? I think if you use I think, it should be backed up, but usually you present the ideas and then you develop a personal view according to those ideas.
Yeah, I think the danger with I think, as you just said, you can it is possible to use I think, but it is dangerous because you might get off track and you everything just becomes anecdotal
Yes.
and nothing is backed up by literature. So you have to be very careful. That's why I think to keep your writing impersonal,
Hmm.
even though you still express personal, make personal evaluative judgments about other people's opinions, you can do that in an impersonal style.
Yes.
Still, you can do that. This helps you to be more objective and making sure that you are sticking to what has been researched, what has been done, um, and what could be uh, what could be the limitations of these research. Once again, I wouldn't say no, you cannot use I think, it's
Yes.
impossible. No, that's not the answer to that. But you have to be very careful that you have to not to get on the track of becoming just personal or everything is just a personal opinion. No,
Yes.
at master level, your
No, they
opinions
need
have
to
to be.
back up and be able to analyze and to write critically um, about their point of view and others.
Yeah.
So yes, I think that's the answer for that. And there's another question. Do I need to create a title for my assignment or just copy title C, critically evaluate learning opportunities provided in the teaching materials, etc.? You do not need to create another title. Just copy what is in the handout that May gave you.
Hmm.
No new titles. So you write title A, for example, justify and critique a lesson you have designed and taught, and that's it. No new titles.
Hmm. Yeah.
Then there's another question. It says in Title C, it requires to evaluate the design and sequence of the activities. Does it mean that I could regard the teaching material as a teaching plan and then evaluate it? And in brackets, it seems like doing Title A then.
Well,
So I'm not sure if
well, you
I.
remember that when you have a book, a textbook doesn't tell you that you have to do
Oh yes,
exercise 1, exercise 2, exercise 3. You, as a teacher, you have to understand what your goal is, what is the goal of the textbook that you are using, what approach, what methodology the textbook is based on. The textbooks are written by textbooks writers, material designers. Material designers are guided by methodology. So um, you have to understand uh, what is the principle behind these activities, and also to answer to you don't have to. If I were a teacher, I would not necessarily go on exercise 1, exercise 2, exercise 3 because that's just not the way I try to achieve my goals. Yeah.
yes, and the difference between Title A and Title C is that Title A says justify and critique a lesson you have designed and taught, and in Title C, the materials are there. So that is quite different when you analyze and critically reflect upon something that you have done and something that others have done.
Right, and you have to keep in mind that these are published textbooks designed by paid, highly paid textbook material designers. And once again, those people are, well, I assume and I hope they really know the methodology that they are trying to sell in their
Yes,
textbooks. So this is just not, a textbook is not just a collection of
of
activities.
activities of exercise. There's a principle behind it. There's theory, there's a methodology behind it.
Right.
So
And you
that's,
have to see that. You have to
yeah,
discover that.
exactly.
What is the approach they are using? Or what is the methodology they are using here? And whether you think that by the time you get to that activity, that talk, what is it?
The
Task.
short radio talk.
Yeah, exactly. Whether that has been prepped properly. Yeah.
Yes, and that links to the last question in this post, question number 4. It says, in Title C, is the short radio talk equals to a small speech? So I think we answered that previously about what a short radio
I
talk
don't actually
is.
fully understand this question. Does this person mean that this is a monologue or a dialogue? What
Yes, I think they're not clear about what a radio talk is. So yeah, it can be a dialogue and like in a format of a podcast.
Yeah, and once again, you as a teacher, you have to make these decisions. Their textbooks sometimes come with teacher books.
Yes.
So what you see here is just the textbooks that the students are using. As I said, some textbooks, usually the textbooks come with teacher guidance. In a teacher guidance, the guidebook, it will tell you, it could tell you how you are supposed to do this. It doesn't mean that it will tell you. It's a possibility. But teachers can have the flexibility to decide, how do I visualize such a short radio talk? It's
Yes.
all your creativity. It's also not just creativity, but also what do you want to achieve with this activity? What is your goal? What are you trying to teach? Why do you do this activity? Why do you include this activity? What do you want the students to get out of it, language-wise? So all these questions, as you ask yourself as a teacher, will lead to decisions. Am I going to do it as a monologue, or am I going to do it as a dialogue, or am I going to do it as a panel? So
Yes, it depends on the objective as well. So
yeah.
So shall we move on to the next question?
Yeah.
It says option 3, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, let me go back to that. Option 3, yes. Mm-hmm.
So I think they're talking about Title C as well, because they mention the use of the input learning use framework.
Mm-hmm.
So the person says that they're having problems in finding relevant materials in learning process. It entails notice, understanding, memory, reflection, and preparing. I can't find other articles talking about this issue. Do you have recommendations of keywords for searching? Well, the books that Ildi has shown
Yeah, this particular what the student is referring to, it comes from this book.
Yes. Oh, it's Scribner.
Yeah, it's here. I managed to open up this book. Always these books at the right page. Anyway, yeah, this is one of the diagrams, and actually it comes up a couple of times. Yeah, so. Yeah.
So I guess perhaps this person can also look input, interaction.
Yeah, I mean, basically, what you have to. I'm not sure what the notice, understand, memory. Oh, wait a second. That's in the middle column, right?
Yes.
And that's all about, all these help the learning process. These are indications of the students learning. When students can notice things, that's an indication that they have some knowledge, they have learned some knowledge. Understanding something also is an indication that you are learning it. So all that mental activity is going on in your head. You have to see in this material, where are we? In 1 second. Yeah. So we have these activities, and you have to analyze all these, well, this material based on what the input is and which activities facilitate learning.
Yes.
And which activity is the output, the use, and well, actually, you know, the talk, the speaking is already your last stage, the output.
Yes. So they can use the books that are suggested in the reading list. They can use the books that you presented now. They can check other authors that have discussed noticing and all these learning processes. For example,
Yeah, actually, if you look
Long,
at
Ellis,
yeah,
I mean, any second language acquisition author as well, even Krashen, I would dare say.
right. And also, if you understand, if you look at the theories, there are theories out there that don't actually believe in mental work. Believe in habit formation, and habit formation is memorization. So there are some methodologies are based on that particular theory. So memorization plays a huge role in that particular methodology, and every single methodology or approach in this book is discussed by giving you procedures. You will find that in this book, and the procedures will list certain activities. So I would definitely have a look at this book. Okay.
Yes, and anything related with working memory and SLA, Vivian Cook's work as well. Perhaps they can check that as an additional to complement what they find in that book.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Or you can type in activity. You can type in when you're looking for activities helping noticing, or
yes,
activities
or input,
helping memorization.
Input, interaction, activities to promote input, etc.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a lot of reading.
Yeah, there's no other way. There's no other way.
I recommend you reading this book. Yeah, so let's see. Next question.
Next question. So we have question of title A. Okay. So there's a confusion here regarding the differences between brainstorming and mind gap or opinion gap. So
right.
if I use brainstorming in a group discussion, can I consider it as an opinion gap task? I would say brainstorming has to do more with, I mean, it could be considered, but I guess it has to do with priming, with eliciting. Whereas I guess, more specific mind gap activities have to do with, you know, a more dialogical task. For example, what did you do last weekend? And then the person has to fill in that gap. If that makes some sense, because I guess the brainstorming you're eliciting as well, but it can be any type of information. I don't know if you're asking for a specific gap to fill in, or if it's just preparation. I guess it would depend on the context.
Yeah, well, I guess you first of all, you have to revisit the communicative language teaching, because that opinion gap is one of their
Yeah.
signature featured activity. And what you have to realize that brainstorming, when you brainstorm and you truly brainstorm, are you asking for opinions?
Yeah.
Or are you asking for simply a list of ideas?
Yeah, that's why I thought about elicitation and priming, because, you know, you just say, well, tell me what comes to your mind when I say, you know, environment or climate change. And
yeah, I mean, that's the idea, that the true brainstorming, you actually try to avoid opinions.
Yeah.
Because if you start involving opinions in brainstorming, you paralyze your brain, because you start arguing. So that's brainstorming, true brainstorming. And a lot of people confuse, make that mistake, that they start brainstorming and they start already arguing. This is a good idea or not a good idea, which you shouldn't. So opinions shouldn't.
Yeah, it's just preparation. It's just prepping, brainstorming. So there is a difference, and you can find that difference in the article or paper or the chapter about communicative language teaching, which you can find in the book.
Yeah, and actually, I remember that in this book, it talked. I remember it was in this book, and I was very happy that even I think it was in this book that was mentioned that brainstorming is no judgment of ideas, and
No.
judgment means opinions. So
Yes.
brainstorming is not that.
Okay, so the specific question has now a specific answer. They're different.
Yeah. I don't actually, the first question, I'm a little bit confused with that, but the listening or listening
I
activity,
think they mean listening activity, including brainstorming.
brainstorming is a kind of task. Now,
I mean, brainstorming is a task.
yeah, you could also, if your question is because you think if you call it task, then it's going to be a task-based approach, I would be very careful not to go down that road, because there's a lot of argument, and read it. There's a lot of questions what a task is. So depending on what methodology you come from. So if you are thinking in your head, oh, it's task-based, read it. Read what task is.
Yeah, because there is a some have presented differences between what they mean by task or activity. So
Right. Yeah.
pay attention to that.
Yeah, because I wanted to bring this up because I remember that in the outline, a lot of people said that, oh, we've done in our lesson plan, our lesson was based on task-based approach. Now, you have to be very careful making statements like that, because you have to understand what task-based approach is. And if you think that your lesson was task-based, then you have to prove it.
And justify it by
Just
saying according to task-based instruction principles, this is what we did.
Yeah, and just because you use the synonym for, you have an activity and the synonym of activity is task,
Yes.
it doesn't mean that just because an activity can be a task, then it's task-based.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That. Yeah.
That's a good point, because task-based instruction has a clear framework that teachers should follow in order to apply it. So you can't just say, well, this is a task just because, or this is task-based instruction because this is an activity equals task. So pay attention to those differences.
Yeah.
Shall we move on to the next one? It says 2 questions.
Okay. Can we talk about our learning experience to criticize online?
If there's no evidence that a certain methodology is used in a particular region, can we use our experience as evidence? Well, I guess in the first one, can we talk about our learning experience to criticize and analyze a certain method? As we said before, you can present it as part of your context or an issue, but it has to be backed up by a principle or a theory in TESOL.
Right. So, I think it's the
and this is what happened to me as a learner, for example, if they don't have teaching experience, and then analyze it in terms of a certain theory that they have learned now in this course. So as long as it's supported by evidence or by a principle, by a theory, then it's fine.
Yeah, I think the problem is with this that when you say a specific issue in teaching or learning English as a foreign or second language, the problem with this that you can easily make the mistake of making it into an anecdotal story.
Yes, and we should avoid that at this stage.
Right. And when we talk about at this stage, we talk about masters
at this level, yes.
At this level, when you are a master student, you cannot just come up, oh, I have seen people in my class, or as a student, me in my class. That is pretty much just anecdotal. You have to see whether this is in your context, meaning in your country, with particular learners, whether it is indeed an issue that has been researched. Otherwise, it just becomes anecdotal, and being anecdotal is not acceptable.
It's not academic, proper academic practice.
Yeah.
And I think that should answer, or in a certain way answer the second question, because if it says, if there's no evidence that a certain methodology is used in a particular region, can we use our experience as evidence?
Okay, so that is an example of being anecdotal.
Yeah, if there's no evidence, it's quite difficult, because I mean, if perhaps that you experience a certain situation within a context, maybe that doesn't necessarily mean that that happens, in that region or in that specific country. I mean, being if you were in a class where the teacher had high teacher talk, maybe that was the particular teacher. It doesn't mean that it is it's widely used, or maybe it does mean that.
Yeah.
So I guess, as we say, avoid anecdotal experiences. I mean, I'm sure that you can find something similar, because of course sometimes we can't find like the exact evidence for a situation that we experience, but I'm sure something similar might come up.
Yeah, so that's the difficulty. That is the danger of this particular
Yeah, yeah,
title, that people might just go with something that they personally experience, but it might not be something that is actually true. It is an issue in that
yeah. Because
context.
if you experience something in your learning context, then you should start asking, well, is it like this in every school? Is it like this because it is a government policy, etc.? So it is who who implemented this on, or why this was implemented, you know. So it can be done, but you have to present evidence to support it, because I'm sure that there is a certain policy to follow. Whether teachers follow it or not, that's another issue.
Hmm.
But I'm sure the government or the educational policies in that region, you know, are based on something.
Right. Yeah.
So shall we move on to
Hmm.
the next one? My internet here is a bit slow, so
I don't see anything here. It's the
oh,
scripting, but there's no question there.
oh, okay. Let
Give
me
me a
check.
second. Did I correct? No, there's nothing there. So there was a question with the title descripting, but there was
Oh
nothing.
yeah, there's nothing there.
Okay. All right. Title A. We're justifying.
Title A: Justify and critique a lesson you have designed and taught.
Yeah. Do I need to have a central argument? Well, uh, uh, to be honest, I don't really understand the question, but if I try to really figure out what this question could mean, you have to have a focus when you write.
Yes,
You have to
yeah,
have a
I think
focus.
that's what they mean. Um, because I guess when you analyze a lesson, there are different. You can look at it from different perspectives,
Yeah.
because different things might have happened during that lesson. You say, well, I could have changed this or that. So I guess if someone decides to focus on a particular aspect of that lesson, that should be fine, as long as they identify that, and they clearly state for the reader that they're focusing on that particular aspect, and the reason why this aspect and not other aspects.
Right. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
especially when it comes to critiquing, just critiquing a lesson, critically looking at the lesson. You can have a lot of too many different angles. Otherwise, your writing becomes shallow. And
yes.
if you have a focus or a couple, few. When I say few, I really mean just few. A
Less is
few.
more.
Yeah, less is more. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So then if you're looking at just a few, your lesson from a very few different angles, then you can become deep with your analysis. If you have a lot of different angles, it's gonna be that deep,
Yeah,
and
and
that
it's
won't.
not clear for the reader either, so it would be very difficult for the marker to grade that essay.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
because if it's difficult for them to understand, then the evaluation is not going to be good. So I guess the students should focus. I mean, if they decide to focus on an aspect, they should say why. They should state that very clearly at the beginning, and explain the reasons why they chose this and not the others, and how they're going to approach, and what their central argument is.
hmm, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that's pretty straightforward for this person. So thank you.
And the last question. I'm not gonna pick up. I let it ring. But so let's see the last. Wait a second. I have to move it. My God, is my learning problems.
Title B. That's the last.
Yeah.
Question. Let me see. Okay. The title is about learning problems on using the article system. Can I include discussion about L2 acquisition and L1 interference as one of the problems?
Okay, so apparently this is an issue in your context.
Yes, I think that is the issue that the student identified.
Yes, okay.
Learning problems on using articles.
Yeah.
And then the person asked if they can include a discussion about L2 acquisition and L1 interference.
Okay, yeah. Well,
Yeah, why not? I mean,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, as long as it's consistent with the argument and there's a reason to that you identified that that problem, and then you see that these are the factors that are causing that issue, I think it shouldn't be a problem to
Yeah.
discuss if these are the factors that are causing that students are not learning, or it's difficult for the students to learn articles, then it should be said, it should be clarified, and then yeah, it should be discussed why L2. But I guess if they say L2 acquisition, that's a bit broad. I would narrow it down a little bit. What do you mean by L2 acquisition? I think L1 interference, that is clear enough. But when they talk about L2 acquisition, I think it's a bit broad at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So this person should go a little bit narrow on when they talk about on the subject of L2 acquisition. So we have the problems of articles. So what's causing that problem? One factor, yes, L1 interference, but also there are some different factors in L2 acquisition. Which factors? That depends on the argument.
Right, and it also depends on L2 acquisition. It depends on what I assume that when you teach article use, it also depends what is the methodology is
Of
based on, what
course,
field it's
yes.
based on, and it might be because of the learning theory that they are in that particular context where you want to write about. It doesn't use the theory, or they use a theory that actually may be outdated, or maybe
Yeah.
they don't that doesn't help this particular issue to overcome this issue. I'm sure there's a lot of literature on articles, because it's a huge problem.
Oh,
And
yes, and it depends on your L1 as well.
yeah,
Some L1s, they don't have articles, or they overuse articles, so it is a problem of interference there.
right.
So it's an interesting issue, and I guess this person might be more focused and be more specific, because as it was put in the question, L2 acquisition is too broad.
Right, exactly, because there are a lot of different ways of
Yeah.
learning languages. That's why we have so many different approaches and methodologies in language learning.
Yes.
So,
So yeah, that was our last question in this Google Hangout, this year's Google Hangout, which started a little bit rocky.
Yes.
but we managed to have more than 20 viewers, I have to say,
Oh,
and 30 and 31 at some point.
really? I
Now we
didn't
have
know that.
18. Yeah, now we have 18 in this moment, so still a lot considering the technical issues that we had at the beginning, and of course we apologize for it, but that's how technology works.
And I guess they can always rewatch this YouTube
Yes.
video, right?
Yes, yes. So later I'll send the link where they can rewatch it. So it's open to anyone. If people did watch it today, they can watch it later or tomorrow. And if people want to watch it again, they can do so.
Yeah, they can fast forward as well if there are questions
Yeah, they can
they are not
pause. They
interested.
can.
Yes. So, yeah, I think well done for everybody who posted questions. Hopefully,
Yes, we had quite a bunch of questions there.
yeah, and hopefully we clarified something up for, cleared up something for you. And if there are still things that are not clear, that's just life. You're not going to, not everything will be cleared up at once. It might take
Yes,
years to understand certain things.
yes,
Um,
yes.
so, well,
Um, but yes, don't give up and read a lot and try to maintain a focus and provide evidence. That's the most important thing, to back up all your claims.
true.
Yes. Okay, so the best of luck to everyone on their essays. And I have to thank my partner here, Ildi, for her patience.
Well, thank you to you.
so, so yeah, I will be sending the link around later
Okay,
for those
great.
who want to rewatch us having this very interesting conversation about essays.
Okay. All right. Once again, best of luck to everybody.
Luck, good luck. Bye, Ildi.
Bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.